Hello, everybody. Scott Golden here with the Pro Wrestling Logic YouTube channel, and we continue our TNT Tuesday Night Titan review series. This with the January 25th, 1985 episode. Really a one angle program centering a lot around over the 43 or so minutes of the program, centering around the hair cutting of Andre the Giant, which at the time in 1985, I mean, other than Andre looking vulnerable to Killer Khan in 1981-82, at least in the New York territory, it was exceptionally rare for Andre to look vulnerable to anybody. He would do handicap matches, he would beat up on whomever the heel of the day was, but Andre looking vulnerable is extremely rare. They actually opened the program, which I thought was really interesting, and I wish uh, companies would do more of this. They opened the program with the aftermath of the match, and the aftermath in this case is an unconscious Andre the Giant who has been laid out, which again in that time, 35 years ago, is huge for episodic television in the sense of 35, 36 years ago, in the sense of just the imagery of the big man laid out, right? Like nobody expects that from Andre, and he's coming to, and this is, I'm assuming, taped in the Pennsylvania studio television they used, because the crowd reaction is not large arena reaction. It's smaller in sound and in miking. So I'm pretty sure probably the Allentown Arena or something akin to it. Anyway, Andre just gets to his feet. His tag partner for the match was SD Jones. Jones we see a lot of here. He becomes an enhancement talent as the years go by. But imagine being in a position where he's teaming with Andre the Giant against Big John Studd and Ken Patera. Patera's still not gone away for his legal issues yet for a couple of more months. But in any event, teaming against the two, the match part is not shown here. That comes in a couple of weeks. I think the match is pretty complete, but suffice to say, they show Patera holding Andre, an unconscious, limp Andre up in the post segment, and chunks of his hair are cut off by John Studd. This obviously leads to the body slam challenge that comes. Also, the bounty being put on Andre. The body slam challenge, obviously, to be fulfilled for $15,000 at WrestleMania. But if you look at it, and I think this is really kind of amazing, everybody thinks of episodic storytelling being at its peak in the WWF, where there's a 6 month plus build up. But here we're at the end of January. WrestleMania is at the end of March, so they have 2 months to build this up, and they do so masterfully, so much so that people all over the country go to closed circuit locations to see this. And really, if you think about it, maybe Andre and Studd is match number 4 from the top. I would say 3, only behind obviously Hogan and Mr. T versus Piper and Paul Orndorff, but and then obviously Wendy Richter and the Fabulous Moolah. Maybe the tag team championship match is in there as number 3, but I would say Andre and Studd goes above the tag championship match. So I mean, your third from the top match on the biggest card in WWF history at that time is set up 8 weeks beforehand, and I think there's something to be said for the nature of episodic television storytelling, where companies are like, oh, our pay-per-views are too close together, the pacing of things moves too fast. No, in 2020, you could still, if you have a plan of 6 to 8 weeks, you can tell a compelling story to get you to a satisfying conclusion at a pay per view, kind of like AEW does, and I think they're doing really well with it in modern day. But this is just a reminder that 35, 36 years ago, They only needed 8 weeks to build up Andre and Stud, and Andre wasn't on television every week hyping this. I mean, there were weeks that did not include Andre the Giant because A, he's selling the haircut, but also B, he's still traveling the country, so getting him on television at the time when you had to fly more and you had to be more deliberate about television tapings that were 2 and 3 weeks apart was a little difficult. Anyway, I just wanted to raise that. I mean, the first of all, the tufts of hair they take off Andre are huge in themselves. I actually wonder this would have been fun. It reminds me of a gimmick that we tried when I was in the Independence, a hair match where hair was collected from around the ring and then sold in plastic bags, little tiny Ziploc bags for $3 to $5 a piece, and people bought it. I wonder if they had had the foresight then to sell a baggie of Andre's hair. Number one, in 1985, would that have sold? And number two, even more interesting, if someone had kept that and kept the DNA of Andre the Giant, what would it be worth on eBay or Amazon today? That popped into my head while I was watching the angle. Like, what would a slab of Andre's hair be like today? Um, anyway, so we go to Heenan, Patera, and Stud, and they're gloating. Stud now at this point, and you got to understand, this is not the first iteration of their feud. Their first iteration of the feud probably might have even been in the 70s when Stud was doing the Executioner character alongside Killer Kowalski, which was, 76 through 78, something like that. Um, but anyway, he's run across Andre there, but here's the first time that he's run across Andre for a more nationalized audience, and he makes the mistake or the genius move, depending on your perception, of calling Andre Andrea, and he's claiming to be the true giant, and Heenan is laughing and he's carrying on, and he's saying that he has all of the tools to be a good hairdresser, and he wants to be a hairdresser for somebody in the audience. So we go to the next segment. The next segment is some poor, I'm sure, office worker, and he's a little ill-kempt, to say the very least. And Heenan, Stud, and Patera just hack him to shreds and pour him with chemicals, and there's just this complete humiliation piece to this whole segment, which at the time would have been maddening, and McMahon's phenomenal in his selling of it in terms of just his outrage at the fact the guy is mangled with this hairdo thing, and it's interesting to say the very least. Obviously, we don't see much. There are a couple other matches here, but I'm gonna highlight the main segments. So Hillbilly Jim comes up next, and he has introduced, as I mentioned, I think last review, I mentioned that his grandmother was a character to be acknowledged. He works out with Hulk Hogan. He's more adept. He's running the ropes better. He's getting more powerful. I think this is the segment where he actually lifts Hogan off the ground a couple of bits. This is before the segment where he is applying wrestling holds and he's struggling to get out of them. But suffice to say, Hillbilly Jim is very much getting ready for the ring, and it's pretty amazing just to think that in 1985, a character like Hillbilly Jim, which most of us would see as kind of a throwaway character over the years in the late 80s, early 90s, and then he's with Coliseum Video for several years after his in-ring career ends. I believe his in-ring career ended maybe 1989, 1990, 91, something like that. He comes back in the late 90s to manage the Godwins, but his actual wrestling career ends in the late 80s, early 90s. But he stays with Coliseum Video for several years after that, affiliated with the company for just almost a decade plus after that. But to be brought in alongside Hulk Hogan in 1984/85, really a strong push, and I almost wonder if they hadn't hoped that the hillbilly thing would have gotten over to another degree, or maybe they were thinking that the Hillbillies would have been good tag champs, or maybe they're thinking that Hillbilly Jim had more athletic ability than he did to carry a program. Because I can't imagine giving a guy that heavy a push without having more for him to do. I'd actually be interested for folks that were watching at the time. Were there any major feuds for Hillbilly Jim that maybe I missed, or was he always kind of a secondary string guy? I know his quote leg injury unquote was utilized to really get Brutus Beefcake to another level, and the broken leg aspect. Obviously, the things with Granny, they poke fun at being Southern. They poke fun at the farm and the barn and all that, and it is what it is. But at the same time, if you're appealing to an audience of now national people, there's a lot of, especially in 30 plus years ago, the stereotypes of the redneck wrestling fan was a thing. I don't think it's a thing now. I think the demographic certainly has changed a great deal, but then the redneck fan, a big deal. And so from there, it makes sense to go with that dichotomy. uh, Paul Vachon then talks about his new marriage. He talks about how awkward it is. He's not really that happy. He's, kind of second guessing himself. Big surprise here. And then in the closing segment, Jesse Ventura, who is dressed in regalia and pink and purple and a red, and not a red, but a golden headdress, for lack of a better term. He's talking about broadcasting and being one of the best, and he could take over and he could do this and that and everything, and how he's a rock star and a wrestler and a broadcaster and all this stuff. And it just reminds me, I wonder, I mean, obviously Roddy Piper, the first primarily heel commentator in Georgia in 83, but obviously, here we see Ventura, who's probably a year away from full retirement, something like that, um, being groomed for the role, and he's hosting primetime when it starts in '85, and all this other stuff. But it's just amazing to me that a guy like Jesse Ventura, who's now around for the next 5 years or so, as the voice of so many people's childhoods, um, is still at the beginning of the rock and wrestling era, and that boom period, is still in the ring and making the transition, and watching him make the transition away from wrestling guys like a Tito Santana or an Ivan Putski, or getting in the ring with the Hillbillies, which I think he does uh, on one Saturday night's main event, or teaming with Randy Savage at house shows, which I know he does at least once. Just really an amazing dichotomy. So I mean, this edition of TNT, more skippable than the previous 2 weeks. The first one in '85, that if you didn't watch, I don't think you're missing too terribly much, but certainly some fun character development, and overall still a program that I think beats a lot of the uh, certainly most weeks of SmackDown to me, even with the campiness of it all. This is better programming, and I'm enjoying it more than I do watching SmackDown week by week. Comment below if you haven't seen TNT. What older program from, let's say, pre 1995 do you enjoy more than a national level program that's on TV now? I'd be interested to hear your reviews. But anyhow, or your opinions. Anyhow, until next time, this is Scott Golden reminding you, keep your feet on the ground, your mind in the moment. Until next time, everybody.